That makes sense.
But ironically, I was making something the other day, and they were all out of kale at the grocery store, which I was like, I thought they never ran out of that stuff around here. But apparently there was a run on kale.
Is that like your version of toilet paper, like California's version of toilet paper?
Kale is toilet paper.
Oh, I missed the boat.
Oh, I forgot we're recording. Sorry.
That was the whole point.
All
right, we're getting pretty close to having our normal percentage of people who signed up in. So
desired audience.
Yeah, we'll get roll. Well, I mean, you never hit your desired audience, but we're in terms of people that signed up. Not all who sign up show up because of conflicts, and that's why we record them and send them out later. But we're pretty close, so I figure we ought to get rolling here. So, and I'm already sharing my screen conveniently, so now I just need to advance the slides. So, and actually double check. Yes, all right, we're good. So, thanks everybody for dropping in. We'll do some quick housekeeping introductions, housekeeping and then introductions. And this is a roundtable, not a presentation, so we're going to be pretty informal today, and mainly look to share some tidbits of information that we thought was pretty interesting, and just let everybody hear from our wonderful panelists and their diverse experience. So everybody, participants are muted. If you have questions for the panel, don't wait to the end to ask the question. If a question pops into your mind you want to ask, go ahead and pop those into the questions bar. I've noticed we already had Brody Scott jump in and say, I don't care what is in the drink as long as the mix is whiskey. Brody, man after my own heart, thank you. So yeah, anyway, like I said, keep asking those questions. Hopefully a little more on topic now that we're getting started. Webinar is being recorded, and we will shoot out that link usually about a week afterwards. That way we can, edit any weird audio stuff that comes up because somebody's internet drops out, whatever. Yeah, and with that, let's introduce our panelists. So I'm going to let each of our panelists say a quick blurb about themselves. You guys can all read the slide perfectly fine. So it's not like we need to read those, but we'll go ahead and start with Nathan since he's on the left.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. So Nathan Wood, Executive Director of the Construction Progress Coalition and founder and CEO of Spectrum AEC. My perspective comes from the general contractors perspective, doing work in the Bay Area with a lot of integrated project delivery and healthcare work, and excited to kind of talk about really what's happened over the last 10 years and dive into it.
And so where were you, just to get this little tidbit, where were you in 2008? Because I believe you were interning in 2008.
I was, yeah. I was kind of bouncing around with DPR construction between an internship in Washington, D.C. area, building data centers out there, and then in Austin, Texas, finishing up school. Hook 'em horns, right, Kelly? Before heading out to the Bay Area to work with DPR. So yeah, I was kind of really caught in that in-between zone where literally, from finishing school in December 2008 to a supposed start date in March that then got pushed out and freeze dates and right in that sucks. So for those that talk about the stereotypical millennial experience, certainly went through that.
Fantastic. All right, and Mallory, why don't we have you go next? And likewise, aside from your general background, where were you in 2008?
Sure. So currently, I am the co-founder and managing partner at Shear Structural. We are Georgia's only all-women-owned structural engineering company. We founded the company in 2017, so a good time. But again, we're approaching very interesting times. And in 2008, I had just started my career, so I had just graduated from Georgia Tech, also here in Atlanta. And I had my degree in construction management, but decided to take a little leap of faith and go work on the engineering side with a business development position. So that was very interesting to all of a sudden was like, oh yeah, I'm going to start selling. And then there was like nobody to sell to. So it was like a wonderful learning experience because I basically had no habits and I had no idea what the good times were. So that was what I was doing, starting my career in this industry.
Fantastic. All right, Chris, take it away, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chris Langiza, Senior Director of Business Development for Procore, get to work with all the amazing technologies that are in our industry today. Came from about 15 years of construction experience, mainly with GCs, but also, working with a lot of specialty contractors at developing and also implementing technology at their firms as well. In 2008, I was one of the fortunate few that was probably young enough to retain my job and making it through the downturn because I, at that point, probably was the only person in my firm that knew how to spell BIM. So it was pretty advantageous to me and took that opportunity and kind of built that into a career of working up and sticking around inside of those organizations. So I think with every downturn, there's a little bit of opportunity out there for those who are willing to grab it. And looking forward to chatting a little bit more about that today as well.
Awesome. And James.
I'm James Norris. I'm the VP of Industry Strategy at ClearEdge 3. I mainly focus on solutions directly to the job site and to the field. In 2008, I was a field engineer, which is basically like a surveyor / kind of superintendent-y role on a high rise. Kind of like Chris, like I lucked out to make it through. I think it was a mixture of, being entry level and I think just finding clamoring to anything that we could do to make building a little bit more efficient. That's actually when we started using robotic total stations. That's because of that. So that's it.
Awesome, thanks. So, I'm Kelly. I'm the host today, which means I don't get a picture because I'm not actually important, which is better. This kind of webinar came up because we were sitting around talking. We'd seen some other similar webinars, but focused more on the business side of managing a business through a recession, business strategies. But one of the things that was a takeaway for me, having gone through the recession, because I was basically running a Revit implementation. I think we were on like the 5th or 6th project back when we were going through the recession. And one of my takeaways was that in a lot of ways, the recession actually helped the technology forward quite a lot. And so we kind of wanted to take a spin on those and do a roundtable with people that had been involved in implementing different technologies, robotic total stations, BIM, VDC, et cetera, and then people that had been, tied into that kind of selling of the work, which also is very technology friendly. And just share that perspective, particularly looking forward to as we come out of this particular recession. How can we position ourselves as technologists in this industry to really take advantage of it, and what kind of things we might be looking for that we learned from going through this in 2008. So with that, We'll just kind of blow right into some questions here. So the first thing I wanted to do was actually start with Chris here. And how did you really find projects being managed differently back in 2008 during the recession? I mean, you were kind of just coming into the industry, and then the floor dropped out. Did you see or experience any kind of changes in just the management of those projects that you were involved with?
Yeah, I think the interesting about that time was everybody was doing whatever they could to stay on top of things, right? And you had a lot of systems, and especially at the firm that I was at the time, a lot of new initiatives that were coming out. And at that time, when kind of the bottom fell out of everything, it was like, okay, let's go back to basics, right? Let's literally rely back on for the company I was at, kind of took a whole bunch of initiatives and just literally shelved them and said, let's go back to what we know, let's go back to what has got us here, and let's focus on, the fundamentals, like things like just good communication, making sure that we're tracking things, making sure we're doing a good job of scoping jobs, making sure that we're doing a good job of just managing and doing good daily reports and things like that. And I think the good thing about that was that it gave us some great places to focus on technology on those fundamentals, right? And not necessarily trying to shift an idea or a culture and having to shift entirely the way that you did things, but really for us to say, hey, listen, we need to do a better job of managing our risk. So with that comes managing a good drawing set. So that was my opportunity to just push Bluebeam to everybody, right? Because at that point in time, it was like, we need to be able to do this digitally, we need to be able to do this faster, and we need to be able to do it with less people. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do it by being more efficient at it, right? And that is a core fundamental of managing projects. And then similarly, like with financial management and stuff like that, like things like projections and things like that, there were some tools that we implemented at that time that weren't fancy technologies. They were just a better process that was leveraging some technology to help them. And so, as people are thinking about like, hey, as things slow down now, what should I be focused on? It doesn't necessarily have to be this massive shift to the way that you do things, but it is a great opportunity to focus on doing the things that you need to do really, really well and really, really efficiently.
Which is a fantastic opportunity to then jump in and apply some new technology.
Yep.
Even though it kind of sounds like back to basics is a bad thing, it's actually usually a great opportunity to streamline kind of core business practices. And Mallory, I'm really curious how this impacted you coming into a business development role at an engineering firm, because I'm sure they had all sorts of mechanisms in place for lead generation and tracking and all this other stuff that just all went out the window. So
yeah, kind of like what Chris said. We pretty much, well, I mean, I had to get back to basics because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing and there's nothing to get done. So it was just, how do we get our name out there and how do we build great lasting relationships? And so, and you start your career, you're very eager, and I was extremely eager, and I was just like, I had no idea what the quote unquote good times were. So to me, that was my new normal. And I just got out there every single day and networked with anybody that I could talk to and started building relationships. And those relationships have stuck with me throughout my entire career. And so to me, it was like this amazing opportunity to really like have just like fundamental business development. So which I'll start with relationships.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I love how, you keep saying like, because you didn't know what the good times were, how interesting that is, because it does, coming into the industry when I did, which was in 2006, we had like 2 years of the good times. And so, and then the bottom dropped out, and it was just such a perspective change. And it's interesting how much of just a little difference in entering the industry can make to how you perceive things. I know, Nathan, you were coming in as an intern right about then, so you saw that same kind of,
Well, and literally timing, because I could have started my job in January of 2009 and I would have been fully employed, but I chose to delay my start date because, hey, you finish college, take some time off, whatever, you're young. And by March, I get a call that now my job may not be a job. And I think a lot of what you learn from that is you got to prepare to pivot. You got to be agile. I was potentially going to be my own, startup project manager for a industrial piping facility in Jasper, Texas, and commute back and forth every week from Austin to Jasper as sort of a contingency plan, just in case the job in California didn't come through. And thankfully it did. But even when you do go out there, there aren't standard project engineer jobs. So what do? You pivot into BIM. I could spell BIM, but I certainly didn't know how to do it. But I kind of dove in, figured out what it could do, how it could really reshape and reframe existing processes, especially within DPR self-perform concrete and drywall groups, and to really see how that blew up, just frankly because we had the time to deal with it. Like it was kind of that right time, right place and the technology maturity was there. But it also took kind of looking for those options and not being too panicked by change and using it as a source of encouragement.
And James, did you see that same back to basics out on the job site in the field engineering side?
Yeah, it was funny. There were really two approaches on our project. There were some people that were probably in their 40s or 50s who really went back to a full analog way of doing things. But at the time, there were they wanted to build buildings with less people, right? Keep overhead low because fees were lower, right? So we had to use less people to build the building, and so me and another guy, Frank Houston, is actually he's at DPR now. When we were at Beck, like we decided, look, man, we need something to make our lives easier, and that's when robotic total stations kind of came into play, and then we were trying to clamor for some collaborative software, which really wasn't around at the time in a way that was easy to use. But yeah, I think the big pivot was it was an opportunity that we took to just try something new, and there wasn't really anyone to say no, because they were like, look, if you think this is going to make us be more efficient, and you're saying that you can use this tool while keeping our overhead low, like by all means try it out. And luckily that worked, and that kind of fed into a new mindset that we could shift as a business and try new innovative things while like not investing a ton of money all at the same time. So it was good.
Yeah, and I mean, in the kind of architectural practice that I was in, we'd been struggling with adopting BIM for about 6 months to a year, and then bottom dropped out, and all of a sudden everybody had time to go for trainings that they never had time to go for before. The projects that we'd done had been more efficient. We were able to do the same work with less people, usually 20% less people on those jobs, and that became extremely appealing all of a sudden. And so 2000, whereas in 2007 we were kind of really fighting against that, I've been doing it this way for 15 years. This is, I know how to do it, don't, not in my backyard, no BIM in my backyard. And then just poof, all of a sudden it was like all of those reservations went away because everybody wanted to be seen as forward thinking and, moving the company forward and being efficient with resources. And it was fascinating how it changed the psychological motivations, which had just been holding us back from adoption. Which I just, it's one of those opportunities with these downturns when things get tight and there's a lot of pressure. A lot of those, comfort-based psychological reasons to not change wash away, which is really, yeah. And yeah, jump in, Chris. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think it was one of the things that's interesting there is people's decisions to get lean, right, will drive a lot of decisions. And there's ways to get lean, right? There's cutting people and cutting, spending and things like that. But there's also like getting more efficient, right? I don't know that today or in 2009 that there were the needs to necessarily just get rid of people, because good people are tough to find, and like at least the company I was at did everything they could to hang on to the people that they had. But by getting more efficient, we could actually do more jobs, and sometimes they were smaller jobs, right? So we all know in construction, sometimes, even though it may seem counterintuitive, that doing a $10 million project is sometimes just as hard as doing a $200 million project, right? And everybody's like, oh, well, yeah, but that's a lot of volume. I said, well, but when the market slows down, there's a lot more of those small projects, and you have to do a lot more of them to make up for the revenue that you lose. So one way to be able to do that is to be able to do more of those projects with the same number of people, right? And technology has always been an enabler for people to get more efficient and to be able to do more with less. And I've always advocated for it. Don't do more with less so you can get rid of people. Do more with less so that you can go take on more work and grow your business, right? And I think that will pay off really well for a lot of people if they take that perspective towards it today. Is, hey, things are slowing down, but that doesn't mean we should try and just do less work with the same number of people we have. It means we should try and do more work, right? And that might mean smaller projects, that might mean stepping outside of a comfort zone, or freeing up some people to go and look at a market that you typically haven't been in, or things like that. And by having good processes and technology to back that up, I think it enables you to do things like that.
I think, Chris, if I could tack on to that, you made a really good point, especially regarding when you can do more projects, it enables you to diversify your portfolio. You know, you mentioned trying in a new market. That's a big struggle that a lot of, whether you're a design firm or engineering firm or general contractor or sub, like that's always that. You know, at my last firm, you know, it was always a conversation about how do we break into this new market. But when you have these smaller jobs, you're forced to, but it then helps you be less inelastic when times are tough. So it's, yeah, I mean, that's a good point, Chris.
Well, and I want to pivot to now. We're 20 minutes in, and that's actually a great segue because Mallory brought something up the other day when we were chatting ahead of time about how her company started out diversified. Again, going back to that, not knowing what the good times were. You know, she kind of set herself up for the next recession. So I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts, Mallory, on how you guys set yourselves up for the next recession. You know, and you know how much this recession really fits into what you were expecting that next recession to be like.
Well, I don't think anybody quite expected this or for it to be so soon. But when we started the firm in 2017, which was awesome, the economy was just roaring. It was a great time to start a company. We had, I think, 19 projects within the first month. So it was amazing. But the whole time we were like, there's going to be a recession. The economic indicators are there that sometime in the next 2 to 5 years, we will see something. All three, my two business partners and I, we lived through the recession. We are of 3 different generations, so it completely affected all 3 of us very differently. And we set ourselves up for continual forecasting. So I think somebody mentioned earlier about forecasting. That was something that we started to do that I started in 2008, was just, we had never done forecasting because nobody had ever needed to. It was just like, oh yeah, we'll add 5 more people and we'll do, 20 more projects every year. So, we actually started using forecasting, just simple spreadsheets. So we did that to begin with. We always continually tweak budgeting. So we look, at all our expenditures, and in all honesty, we wait until we really need to hire somebody. So we wait until our staff is completely there. And then we looked at making like a very strategic hire, and we take our time to find the right person. And then we diversified our project mix. So we always knew we wanted to be 50-50 public-private. And then that gives us a lot of opportunity to do, federal work, municipal work, private sector work. And then we can, just make sure our resume, as our company looked really great. So we're in a wonderful position, and we actually had forecasted to be down like 20% revenue this year at the end of last year already. So, we're probably going to make that forecast exactly.
That's awesome. It's funny you said that. So we used to have a little bit of a similar approach. Is even though we were in a company that bid a hard bid a lot of work, we did a lot of negotiated projects. Our leadership made it a point to continue to go after hard bid projects at least every once in a while, because that's a muscle that if you don't use it, you lose it kind of scenario. And so, so it's really important to flex that muscle. And even if it's not a significant portion of your business, the ability to keep the muscle so that when things do shift to, more private or more public or more hard bid versus more design build versus, some of the other delivery methods, that you can respond, right? And that you have those people inside of your organization that can at least educate the others on how this goes. And I think that's going to be super relevant right now, right? It's when jobs are basically walking in the door like they have been for the last few years, it's going to get really competitive again, I think, which is what happened in 2008 and 2009, where, we're going to be back in the world of like 14 bidders on projects, which is going to be crazy. It could be fun too, right? Especially if you're good at it and you're well prepared for it. And, some of the data that we have at Procore is already indicating that we're seeing the market adjust to that, right? We're seeing people setting the number of bids that people are putting out there going up significantly. We're seeing the number of projects that they're actually bidding on go up as well. So those are some indicators that people are starting to take that knowledge and apply it already in preparation for what's happening today.
Yeah, nobody likes to do federal projects. We don't love to do federal projects, but a year and a half ago, we were like, all right, our resume needs some updating. So we specifically talked to one of our clients who has a federal sector. We met with that principal and we were like, oh, we would love to do some of your federal work. And, got the ball rolling, and now we have a plethora of those projects. So, you just sort of like, yeah, stretching those muscles is a great point.
Well, and it's funny to me, in many ways, this drop, at least from what I've seen, mirrors the 2008 recession, just dramatically compressed, right? Because I think the firm that James and I were both at did architecture and construction. And so, full service architecture shop, full service construction, and sometimes worked on both. And so, the architecture firm was the typical leading indicator. We saw the drop in 2008, right away. But the construction firm didn't really have much of an impact until 2009. Things were kind of just continuing on until 2009. And then, then all of the work that the architects didn't design in 2008 didn't get built in 2009. Whereas this, because of all the stop work, shelter in place, everything else, it was like everything just stopped at once, and so it's been interesting and then again, to some degree, the architecture profession has been a little sheltered because work from home is a little bit easier. And then the construction profession has probably been a little worse hit, particularly in markets where a lot of sites have been shut down. But it's just fascinating to see, what took, 18 months, 10 years ago, take 2 weeks.
Yeah, the federal work that we did really kept us moving forward, and it was very consistent revenue, and that also allowed us to kind of maintain with whatever we had, strategic goals at our firm that we could stick with. We didn't have to completely shirk them away. We could stay with like a long-term plan, and that was a benefit. Mallory, like you mentioned, splitting some of your or diversifying your portfolio and doing more of that state or federal work it was important. It was critical for us. So,
And so the thing I wanted to ask now is, given this recession's a bit different than the last one, but not entirely. But what have you guys seen anything in terms of how technology has been used to address this recession that maybe has surprised you?
I was going to ask you that, Kelly. I was going to say, could you have, as an architect, have done BIM from your house in 2008? No, I didn't think so. And I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? I mean, Zoom didn't exist, GoToMeeting, none of these things existed in 2008. And just like we've had those conversations at length of just how hard this would have been if this exact situation had happened in 2008. So like the role of technology is so unique, but yet the constraints and like the scenario and the variables are very much the same, but the technology is so much more evolved. So will we repeat ourselves again, or will we kind of hopefully learn from that and improve upon how we react to this now that internet connections are faster and mobile devices are better and iPads exist, and things like that. It's crazy to think that we built job sites without iPads in 2008.
Well, from like this, I was gonna say from the sales perspective too, like social media existed, but not professionally. I mean, I remember having a conversation with our CEO and he's like, no, it's a trend. And I like wrote it down on a piece of paper and stuck it on my whiteboard because I was like, no, it's definitely not a trend. And so, I mean, we weren't able to stay connected in the same, we didn't stay connected like that in 2008. It was picking up the phone, it was seeing people in person, going to networking events, being physically connected. And so it would have been very different back then. So tech has really helped us sort of stay connected, some good, some bad. Maybe we're staying too connected or sharing too much of our opinions, but
Chris, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say we still do a lot of jobs without iPads, Nathan, as much as we all want to think we don't, but we still do a lot of work without it.
Yeah, but still smartphones and I mean it's not digitally structured and perfect, but it is electronic more often than not. And yes, there's still a piece of paper being printed, but most foremen can't do their job at least without their phablet or their whatever. They use something that's connected these days.
One thing I like to separate in what's happening now versus what happened in like 2008 is like there's the social distancing part, right? And then there's the economic impacts of that, right? Those are two very different things. In 2008 and 2009, we weren't forced to work from home. We were just forced into a very difficult business situation where the work just wasn't there. People were competing over jobs, layoffs were happening because the work wasn't there. And, that's a result of the social distancing and how that's impacting the economy. The technology, I think, is significantly helping, deal with the social distancing problem, right? I was talking to a former colleague of mine, and I'm happy to say the name Styles that I used to work at, and we were talking about how they were bidding work. And what was interesting was they've been a Microsoft Teams shop for several years now and could never get really much engagement from the pre-construction group to leverage, virtual meetings, shared documents, chat, any of those things, because they were like, it's not trusted, it can't be used in the heat of the moment, it will fail, right? And they would come up with all the excuses so they just wouldn't use it. And now what's interesting is they are forced to use it. They have no other option, right? So they're taking that technology and they're kind of like, okay, we're gonna have to make this work. And in the conversation that I had with one of the vice presidents of Precon over there, he goes, I don't know that we'll ever go back to the old way now. And he goes, I think we can do more bidding because, to be honest with you, sitting everybody in a room and having them in the war room, if you will, right, and have to go through all these things and on phone calls is pretty inefficient, right? And what we're realizing is that we can pull people in and out as we need them, and everybody's working on the same documentation, which means we can get more bids, we can be on the phone with more people, and some of that's probably a function of the people being more available to be connected with. But it's interesting how that will change the business outcome of actually being able to go after more work, as opposed to, yes, we're solving it with technology, but it's making us so much more efficient.
Yeah, and it cracks me up though, because it's like, those are all the reasons in 2007 why we couldn't implement Revit on projects, and then 2008 happens, and then, hey, we'll make it work. But one of the things that to me is so fascinating about the differences between this recession and the last one is this one, because it's been so sudden and hopefully will be comparatively short, I think it really favors technologies that are much faster and easier to adopt. Because I couldn't have implemented BIM at a 150 person architecture firm in 2 weeks. But on the other hand, we've seen companies everywhere pick up Zoom or Teams or solution of choice to it just almost instantly to deal with working from home. And that the speed and of this particular recession, I think, is uniquely favorable to these kind of quick, easy to learn solutions. So now may not be the best time to implement Revit at your firm, but great time to implement Zoom, right? So with that, I want to kind of jump to that forward-looking part of the discussion and kind of focus us on what do we think is going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months? I don't think any of us have a finger on when we're going to come out of this, but when we do, what are the kind of technologies or opportunities that each of you are seeing in the marketplace, to really take off, as we kind of start chugging away again and social distancing is decreased, and hopefully we get treatments and vaccines and all that kind of fun stuff, so we can get closer back to normal. So James, I'll let you go first, since you were squirming there.
Right on. I think I have probably two specific ones. I think data analytics kind of guided with machine learning. I think machine learning is going to really start is going to have a big movement for many reasons, whether it's productivity or risk mitigation. I think the other is going to be, making and allowing those who do installation of work a lot more efficient. So if I were to choose two, I think it's, I think of 2008 to now as analog to digital, right? and then it's like cloud to something else. And everybody, you know, and right now we see them that you hear about the McCleany curve about productivity of our industry is very low. And while, you know, things are slowing down, I think you're going to see a lot more of machine learning again. And I think, you know, whatever we can do to ensure that installation in the field is done properly or is easy to do is going to be a big thing. Those kinds of, because they're both kind of underserved areas, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, I think that you know, we never really got the digital processes out the last mile to the foreman and the tradesman, right? In the, you know, the last big changes. And so, you know, that is kind of the next frontier. It reminds me how at Beck, you know, that coming out of 2008 for us, it was laser scanning. Like we had all these jobs that went on hold for 18 months and we didn't have a clue what got built, where they stopped, what percent complete this was, that was. And you know, that was when we shifted from paying other people to do scanning for us, you know, 3 times a year to, you know, buying a laser scanner and having it busy, you know, 24/7, you know, for 6 months. And for us, it was all about figuring out what got put in place. And, you know, I think we'll see, you'll see a similar uptake and adoption for reality capture technologies coming out of this for the same reason, just on a much shorter time scale. But Nathan, what's your crystal ball telling you?
Well, I mean, I think you hit on it there. That's the general trend in downturns when it comes to technology and how you sell technology is in good times, you sell it as an efficiency tool. In downtimes, you sell it as a risk management tool, right? And so the ability to really focus on all these different risks that are out there of what happens when the next, outbreak comes again, the next wave comes again and we don't have a vaccine yet. Like, are we going to be ready for better remote collaboration so that we don't shut down a lot of these pre-construction and pursuit and other parts? Because a lot of what I'm hearing from contractors is that construction projects in construction are still moving. It's everything that supports that that's stopping. And we have a very delicate supply chain that is going to get broken up real quickly if we don't figure out how to continue to social distance and remote collaborate, at least as fast as these essential construction projects do continue working. So I think it's going to be really interesting, 6-12 months beyond, like, we're going to be dealing with this for a long time. It will get better, but we'll still continue to deal with it. So I think it just continues to drive that need for digital transformation, and the tools are there, and we just needed the urgency. So unfortunately, we've got it.
Yeah, no doubt, lots of urgency.
Yeah.
Chris, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a few different pieces here to dovetail on what James said. We've been on this transition from analog to digital for several years now. And what we like to think is we're now on this transition from digital to insights, like actually putting the data to use to do something with it. And I was on a call with a customer yesterday, and we were talking about like all the data that they were collecting with their Procore account and how amazing it was. But what they realized is that they were kind of lying to themselves a little bit on what that data actually meant, because as they started to dive deeper into it and actually analyze it, they were able to identify that some of their assumptions, some of those gut feelings that they had about things were not actually true. So they were disproving some of the hey, this is how we do things because this is what my 30 years of experience tells me using the data. So, whether that's artificial intelligence and machine learning paired with the data, whether that is dashboarding tools that have come and are a lot easier to use so you can visualize the data a lot better. I do think that just data as a big umbrella topic it is going to become more and more important now, right? Because people are going to use that information, hopefully, to drive business and to drive efficiency and to determine like where they should go and inform, where they were. For some of them, maybe they have good data that can look back to 2008 and 2009 and what worked and what didn't work. I'm fairly doubtful, but it certainly seems to be something there. I think the other thing is, and I know it sounds like super like cliche in today's world, but just collaboration, right? Let's get back to how do we connect people and how do we make sure that they are sharing information effectively, whatever stakeholder they are, whether that be owners, GCs, specialty contractors, architects, engineers. Like, we all need to be able to work together and I think that's like being bubbled up right to the top right now of like, hey, we can't physically be together. And I actually question like, you know, architects and engineers, we've always had a hard time getting them to actually come to the job site, right? And you know, the excuse has been, you know, superintendent walks into your office and goes, get the engineer out here, I need him to look at this, right? And it's like, well, do we really need him out here to look at this? And do we need to wait for her to come, you know, a week from now for the next OAC meeting to be able to solve this problem? And maybe we don't, right? Like maybe there's a better way. Like I remember like when the iPhone was first around and people were using like FaceTime to FaceTime with the engineer, especially if you had like a remote engineer. We have better solutions for that now. Like I could do a job site walk today and have 6 or 8 different people engaged in that job site walk and go over progress of the job. I mean, that's how people are getting inspectors and banks and owners to sign off on projects so that they can get paid and move forward. And so I'm hoping that that leads to more collaboration and that the technologies that support collaboration are going to become even more powerful.
Yeah.
So back to basics, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Back to basics. Well, Mallory, I want you to get the last word in on this, and then we'll. I'm going to do a quick poll for everybody on the call, and then we'll go into Q&A. So get those questions queuing up.
Sure.
For the
audience. I was gonna go a slightly different direction and say just like flexible scheduling. I think this where we are now has really shown us that like we just have to be flexible. I mean, I have a 5-month-old baby at home that I, you know, have to deal with right now. So it's a great distraction, but you know, in 2008, we lost so much brain power in our industry. I mean, I don't know the numbers. I'm sure it's terrible. We lost so many people. And it has taken us, I mean, we haven't even really truly recovered from that. And it's so hard to find great people. I think we'll start to almost look at like the Uber model of like, can we gig work out in a little bit of a different way? So maybe a stay-at-home mom can help us work on a project and she earns a little income. She maintains her professional licensure. She keeps up with the standards. You know, we're now using Revit 2020 and the last time she used Revit was Revit 2012. So I think there's a lot that we can do there that now many leaders especially on the design side, you know, who might have thought like, that's just impossible. Like we can't do that. Like there's no way we can have a part-time contract worker, you know, work from their home on a Saturday or Sunday. Like that just won't work. You know, how do we even do that? I think now it's like, oh yeah, we can do it. You know, like we can totally do it. And we've been doing that. We have 3 contractors that we've had since we started and it's wonderful. And so we talk about it all the time, but now it's like, oh, now it's great. Like everybody, we can definitely do this. We can have flexible scheduling. We can bring more women back into the workforce who can work at odd hours and we can make it work.
I think Nathan's laughing because him and I have been talking about this for literally years, and why it is that the architecture, engineering, and construction industry couldn't function under this model. And I think an event like this is actually shifting that mindset. I think, you know, Mallory, kudos to you to already be doing it and be, you know, able to position and take that, because I was we did a town hall for our partners the other day, and our chief culture officer, Steve Zom, said he thinks that one of the biggest shifts we will see out of this event is that talent will become more available to people because they will realize that you don't need to be physically where the headquarters or the office is, and you should get the best talent no matter where they are or when they can work. And so that's pretty powerful when you think about that. And with a model like that where you can collaborate and the collaboration tools are there to do it, we can get amazing people and talent to work in our organizations.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I just pushed out a poll to everybody on whether their company is currently pushing forward or pulling back in terms of technology and innovation, because you know I'm curious. You know, again, looking back at the 2008 recession, I think you know, if you had asked that question a month in, most people would answer pulling back. And then if you asked it, you know, 6 months in, most people would say pushing forward, because you just had that slow curve. Wow, Wow, that's interesting. We've got 94% saying pushing forward and 6% saying pulling back. So I'll leave it open for a little bit longer and then close it and pull it up on the screen. But I thought it was fascinating, or I thought it would be fascinating to see, if everybody's just jumped straight into pushing forward because of how quick this thing happened. And looks like the hypothesis is being backed up by the data. All right, I can go close this out here.
Our audience may be a little bit biased.
Well, I mean, it is a technology, focused presentation. Let's see if I can pull that poll up on the screen here. Share.
We're all idealists.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, that's 95% pushing forward, 5% pulling back. But this is not, personally. This is their company, right? 95% say their company is pushing forward, and this is kind of to me the big difference in this recession from the last one is. It seems like because, I think it was Mallory said it, because, basically there is no choice, right? Like you have to, in order to keep working, you have to move forward because you couldn't do it without adopting some of these technologies. So I think it's a really fascinating difference, in some ways, just how quickly people have moved into, all right, let's get on it. Because I guarantee that didn't happen in 2008. I think everybody was cutting back on everything they could, anything new for like at least the first couple months until it was like, okay, now let's focus on those basics and move forward.
So I'm gonna that though.
Go ahead.
I think I wasn't sure where that poll was gonna land, but I mean that gives me hope about the productivity issues we have and the things that Mallory just brought up. That the mindset, the biggest issue with adoption of technology or just better workflows to make us more money, make us more efficient, and keep good people was a cultural problem. And what this is kind of telling me a little bit is that part of that cultural problem is going away. So, anyways.
Yeah, and I agree. So I want to grab a couple questions from the audience. So we had Josh DeStefano with DPR. Hey, Josh. Ask, we, the AEC industry, has seen an upward trend in VC investment over the last few years. How do you think this recession will affect AEC investment? So that's an interesting question. Chris, you laughed first, so you go first.
Oh man, I gotta keep my mouth shut next time. It's been very interesting, right? So there's been a ton of investment over the last several years in venture capital money coming into the construction space, which has been amazing, right? And I think you're going to see a slowdown clearly of how companies are going to be able to gain access to capital, at least in the short term, right? Until we see how the industry is truly affected and how some of these companies weather storms. So, dealing with our partners, we're hearing this on different phases of those who, just raised, who are really super happy that they just did and that they're in a good position. And to be honest with you, a lot of them are going on lockdown, right? They're focusing on their customers, focusing on their product, but really like scaling back any other spending. Then you'll see those who raised a bit ago, who may be starting to get a little bit concerned about where their cash is today and what their burn rates and things like that are. And then there's those who are out trying to raise right now. I think there is money out there. We have seen investments happen. I just don't think that they're going to happen at the clip that they were happening before, which will be interesting to see for sure. But I think there still is money out there for sure. I mean, it's not, this is not just our industry problem. I do think, however, as opposed to maybe VC money that's going into a lot of other areas, I think as much as everyone realizes that construction has been pretty essential, and that given the spending that's going to happen that comes as a recovery or a stimulus to the economy, that actually construction is not a bad place to put your money as well. So some of the venture capitalists I've said they're still very open to lend, but the bar is going to be a lot higher. There's going to be a requirement to have proven yourself, to have shown the growth numbers. And I think the other thing is we're seeing this in, this is not a construction thing, but just in general, those who are taking funding. It's very interesting to see if they're taking funding at the same valuation, at a bit of a haircut, or I think very few people are probably taking funding right now and getting a better valuation than they were potentially previously. So I think those will be some of the factors that are going to affect how much money is getting pushed into the industry today. But I do think there's still money there, and I think it's actually going to be good, because I do feel like there's been a lot of startups in our space, and I think this will cause focus, enforce focus.
Yeah, it's a great point. We've also got John writing, probably mispronounced that last name, John, I apologize. But has anyone seen a rise in tech adoption with trying to see data for the whole company by purchasing systems like Procore, BIM360, et cetera, because of the pandemic? Have we started to see any uptick in the purchasing of that technology yet, or kind of are we in a wait and see moment? Nathan, I'm curious what you're hearing. You've got a lot of feelers out there in the world.
I mean, certainly there's more time to think about it. I think we're probably still, I would say, a little bit in panic mode to be making really big decisions, but certainly the conversations around, hey, we need to take a really hard look at our ERP platform, at our project management platform, at our workflows, and kind of the back to basics, and getting to that final decision point where maybe they were testing a few solutions but not really ready to make a decision, where now it's like, okay, we need to make a decision and we're ready to. So we're probably more in the decision-making phase before we get into actually deciding and implementing it.
Yeah.
I know on our end that Autodesk is actually offering like long-term trials of a lot of products. So we had, like limited users for things, and now we're just like letting everybody try it out, because like, why not? You get like a couple months for it for free. So I think that too will probably help more people. For us, we were already using it, but now it's like, okay, it's actually like we are more productive when everybody has access to a license. So I think those are the types of things that a lot of companies are doing long-term trials, which are great. So it's a good way to test. But again, we don't have to, we're trying to limit our purchasing too, just to, make sure. So it's not something that we're thinking about buying now. But,
So we had Greg. Oh, I want to hit another cue real quick. We had Greg Hale jump in and ask, analytics are gaining steam as we learn how to collect data. What kind of metric insights are making a difference in AEC? Maybe some examples of what kind of metrics we should be looking at. And James, since you kind of brought up the analytics and metrics stuff with ML originally, why don't you take a crack at that
one? Yeah, I think the big things at our last firm, so I mind saying his name, but Frank Freilich had built a lot of different data analytics, really just forecasting our job safe. And I think, Chris, you brought up a point like, should I go after this project? How long will it really take to do? I think right now, when we have to be as risk averse as possible, but at the same time bid on work we're not comfortable doing, the more information you can know to inform good decisions for like signing that contract and understanding like the length and duration, how long things will really take versus what your gut tells you. So Greg, I think being able to forecast how long a job is really going to take is very critical. I think forecasting cash flow and finding ways of knowing what it's really going to take to make sure there's enough in the coffers is very important, to layer your cash flow over when jobs are starting and stopping, and doing that in the most intuitive way possible. And that's why I think, again, the machine learning tying that will help businesses reduce their risk. And I really hope that somehow that goes into the insurance side of things, that can somehow, negotiations to that can like reduce the cost of insurance, so you can, when you're bonding it, for bonding capacity, it'll help. So but I think the big one is forecasting length of time will be a big one.
Yeah, I mean, cash flow, I totally agree, because cash flow is king when you're in a recession. Whether you're a startup or a billion-dollar GC, cash flow is king. And so we've got one last thing I kind of want to end on. I love this point. This is from one of our viewers in Romania, who has popped on and said that She believes that, or he believes that efficiency is a result of optimization. Optimization is a result of open mind, of the company having an open mind with their management for new technology. What is your opinion? So I'll let everybody jump in on that, and let's just start with Nathan.
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of answers both questions, because going back to all of this, I think dashboards, BIM, whatever it is, it's less about the technology and those outcomes, and more about, again, that measurable definition of success, and really getting down to what are those key performance indicators that are going to drive that success. And just, one simple example, I mean, cash flow is a perfect example, and kind of a simple one, but another one, going to RFIs and looking at RFI collaboration and project efficiency, using RFIs as a leading indicator. The traditional measuring the number of RFIs isn't going to tell us the leading indicators that we really need to know, is this project healthy or not. It's things like average response time, or response time by individual, or other kind of more granular. But if we don't know what it is that we're looking for, it's hard to, again, have those measurements and drive those behaviors and drive that culture. So much of this, where we talk about technology and we talk about data, it's important to really separate the two of those, and understand what are those data measurements that are really critical to the success of your firm, of your projects, and is the technology actually delivering those data points to you in the most efficient way possible.
Awesome. Mallory.
Yeah, I was thinking about the mindset thing, now that we're not all physically together in the office, where things maybe like you have a leadership who has like a butt in seat kind of mindset, and like, oh, this person is a great worker because they are here for 60 hours a week. They might only do 20 hours worth of work. Now we actually are forced to look at data, and it's like, how much work are they doing at home? How much work do they get done on their own? So I think like it's a good thing for leaders to be able to be forced, especially leaders of an older generation, to be forced to think about how this remote work actually affects our productivity, where maybe they might have had different metrics before, and now they actually have to look at real data.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great point. Chris, you got a minute?
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. I do think definitely that there needs to be an openness to exploring new ways. Love the point that Mallory made about, hey, the new working world, and it's not just about physically showing up, it's about actually bringing the work to play. And, it's good. I think we're going to be forced to open our eyes and open our minds to new ideas and new technologies and just new ways of doing things today.
And James?
I agree.
Short and sweet, I like it. Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about recessions, right, is that they kind of force people into an open mindset, because all those bad habits and all the comfort that complacency brings you gets just washed right out from under you, when you're managing a business during a recession. And so it's really, I think, an opportunity for all of us that are technologists to look for solutions to the real problems that are plaguing the business, particularly in these times, and find ways to solve those problems. And it's pretty much everybody on this call built their career doing that at a firm. It's a great opportunity to do it again, or do it for the first time within your firm. So look for those opportunities, figure out how to solve the business problems, and yeah, there you go. All right. Well, we will close this out. Thank you to all the panelists for your wonderful insights, thoughts, and time. And yeah, as I said earlier, this will be recorded, or has been recorded. So we'll shoot that out in about a week if anybody wants to jump back in, listen to a part they missed. If their child walked in the middle of it and they had to get pulled out like I did for 30 seconds, that happens. We've got the recording for a reason. So yeah, all right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly. Bye. Thanks, everyone.